Hi, I'm Josh Rushing, filling in for Lisa Fletcher, and you are in the stream. Today, murder in the streets of Chicago. What's behind the city's growing homicide rate, and can anything be done to end the killing? Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is here looking out for your live feedback. So tweet her using the hashtag AJStream. All right, Malika, how is our community reacting to violence on the streets of Chicago?
Well, Josh, this is definitely a topic, of course, that's near and dear to my heart as a lifelong resident of the south side of Chicago. So what I've seen is I've been getting into these conversations with people that are all Chicagoans themselves, and they're telling me their personal stories. One is from Amani Lindsay, who tweeted this, and he's been passionately tweeting us all morning. He says, I'm from the Chi, or Chicago, and I know the solution is complicated, but caring is a good place to start. Police, school, and government just don't care. Now, for those of you at home, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you think. So join the conversation by tweeting us with the hashtag AJStream.
Yeah. Joining us in the studio is Amina Matthews. She's a violence interrupter with the nonprofit Chicago organization called Cure Violence. Her group uses public health-based approach to stop neighborhood violence. Amina, welcome. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, we're also looking forward to hearing from a broad range of Chicagoans in today's Google Plus Hangout. In fact, I think I'm the only person on today's show that isn't from Chicago. Thank you all for being here and joining us today. Now, if you want to be in our next Hangout, follow AJStream on Twitter for updates on how you can take part. It's one way for you to be in the stream.
Hi, I'm Teresa. I'm Creative Commons Portugal Legal Project Lead, and I'm in the stream.
This is a picture of Darius in New Orleans when they here went there to help clean up and stuff after Hurricane Katrina.
Pictures are all that remain for Darius McGraw's family to remember him by. Last November, the 22-year-old was shot 4 times in the back while on the way to pick up his infant daughter, Harmony. His father, Arthur, says Darius was a community organizer and not involved in any gang activity.
I can see him just smiling. I just see him holding Harmony. I see him talking with his mom. I see him playing with his brother.
McGraw was one of 513 people killed in Chicago in 2012. That's more than any other U.S. city.
That touching report was by Al Jazeera's Matthew Castle. And it's the story of Darius McGraw, the 22-year-old shooting victim. It's become all too common in Chicago, a place now known as the most murderous city in the United States. Not even 2 weeks into the new year, into 2013, there's already at least 13 people who have been murdered. Some Chicagoans have even likened the city to a war zone, using the nickname Chirac to compare it to the war-related deaths in Iraq. So, what are the root causes of the rampant violence in Chicago, and what can be done to end the violence? Here with us to discuss these issues is Lance Williams, Assistant Director of the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies in Chicago. His work focuses on urban cultural studies and at-risk youth. He's joining us via Skype from Chicago. Lance, welcome to the program.
Hey, peace. What's up, Josh, Sister Bina, and Malika? How y'all doing?
All right, Lance, start us off. Tell us what's going on in Chicago.
Oh, wow. A lot of things going on in Chicago, but as it relates to violence, you know, we have an extreme marginalization problem going on where large segments of the African American and Latino communities have essentially been isolated from mainstream society. So what you have going on is pockets of communities where violence is escalated as a response to a lack of structural opportunities, lack of educational opportunities, lack of job opportunities, extreme forms of institutionalized racism that's going on. All of these things are converging at one time that contribute mightily to violence in these communities.
But Lance, those things have been there for years and years and years. What's different now?
Well, I think some of them have been exacerbated by forms of policies. You know, I think as I've looked at this thing over the years, I'm really concerned about educational policies like Renaissance 2010 that has transformed Chicago public schools from public schools to a charter school system. So when that happens, kids who have traditionally gone to schools in their communities no longer can go to these schools. They have to leave out of their communities, and this has a big impact on school going. So a lot of the young brothers that I work with at the elementary school level over the last 10 to 12 years, because they can't go to the community high school, have decided not to go to school any longer because they're afraid to travel outside of their neighborhoods. Now, they won't come to you and say, hey, man, I'm scared to go to school, but that's really what it is. And so for the last 10 to 12 years, you have a large population of young African-American males who haven't even gone to high school. The drug economy has dried up a lot on the streets, so a lot of the money that used to be around through crack cocaine sales isn't there. So these young men realize that essentially their lives are over with, that there is nothing really for them. So there's a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, and I think a lot of depression. And the way that plays out is interpersonal violence. So it's not gang-related violence at all. This is interpersonal conflict between individuals who may be affiliated with a gang or not. But this is just their way to kind of lash out, and it's almost a suicidal type of mentality where young men have just given up and they're depressed, and it's playing out in extreme forms of violence.
Now, wait a second. You said something there, Amina, that I thought was pretty challenging. He's saying this isn't gang violence, this is just interpersonal violence, and they perhaps are associated with gangs, but that's not what's going on here. It's not a gang war. Now, I know you are a violence interrupter. First, can you tell us what a violence interrupter is, and then do you agree with his assessment of this?
Violence interrupter is, my goal is to stop the transmission of violence from one person to another.
Transmission?
Yes. So we look at it as a epidemiology approach of that it is an epidemic, that the violence, what has changed in my view of what has happened over the years is that Chicago has always been typically a volatile city. And it's always had structure, and once the structure left, and as it chipped away, and as the guys and the girls that was part of whatever type of group, as that chipped away, then it left to the young guys to their own understanding of what was left for them to understand, far as whatever happened in what organization. If it was, Gangster Disciples, if it was, Stones, if it was Vice Lords, whatever, these guys are not understanding the history of it because everybody that is part of that history is either dead or locked up. So being a violence interrupter, as the violence occurs, as that violence act occurs, I get in and I stop the transmission of violence and then give them some education about really what happened back when they thought was going on. They're left to their own understanding. And I go back to Chicago has always been a historical violent city. What's so paralyzing for me is the guys and girls are getting younger and younger that are the perpetrators and that are the victims. We're talking about 10-year-olds that have a murder or a double murder, so 15-year-olds,
I haven't seen that since I was covering the murders in Juarez, and a lot of the shooters were really young guys.
And that's the way that these young guys feel. They feel that, whatever membership that they uphold to, if it's something that they made up, or if it's, under a particular star that they still hold far as, back in the day, but then they make their own name up, they feel that whatever is going on in their time is they're defending their city. They're defending like it is a war. It's and they're on defense. It's like them. They feel like it's us against them. So that's why we have to hurry up. We're at a state of emergency. We've had plenty of conversations about it. We've seen programs that have been proven to work. Let's continue to work those programs and help the young guys and girls.
And speaking of programs that continue to work, a little bit earlier, Lance mentioned education. We've got some tweets here with people saying that the root cause of this is socioeconomic factors combined with a lack of job and educational opportunities. Another from Nazmul who says the problem is unemployment and poverty. But I want to turn this to Liz Dozier in our Google Plus Hangout. And Liz, of course, is a principal of Finger High School. And Finger is, infamous, unfortunately, for an incident in 2009 involving a homicide. Could you tell us what happened, Liz, and tell us what the school is doing to turn around that image?
Sure. So in September of 2009, one of our students, Darian Albert, was actually killed about 7 blocks from the school. And he was actually beaten to death by several peers, both in the school and then people within the community. And so I think that really brought a lot of attention to youth violence, not only within Chicago, but nationally and also internationally. And what's come from that since then is fast forward about 3+ years. Finger at one point in time was known as one of the most violent schools in the country. You fast forward 3.5 years, we received additional resources and we were able to decrease violent misconducts in the school by 85%, increase test scores, freshmen on track, things that really matter, increase college enrollment, things that really matter in terms of making sure that children are successful. But I think it goes with providing kids what they need in terms of job opportunities. If you talk to students, what they want more than anything, they want mentors and they want job opportunities. And so really providing that for them. I do agree with the discussion that was said earlier. It's many factors in terms of why violence is perpetrated and what happens in the city. I think it's not just one single issue. It has to do with healthcare, with jobs, with what's happening in our communities as a whole.
Well, Joshua, I'd like to ask you, what role does race and segregation play in this?
Well, you got to understand the demographics of Chicago, geography. Chicago is a very segregated city, and so we don't have a lot of integration between ethnic groups. So where you find African Americans, you don't really find too many Caucasian people, and where you find Hispanics, you don't find African Americans. But I work in Chicago line, so half of our community is Hispanic and half of our community is African American. And the piece that you showed earlier, Darius McGraw, he was actually one of our guys. And you know, we kind of lost another one.
Hey, Joshua, I'm going to interrupt you because we're having some issues with your sound. We're going to work on that. And in the meantime, I want to come back to Amina and ask this idea that violence is a contagion and should be treated like a disease.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like an interesting theory. Mm-hmm. Is there proof that it actually works to treat it that way?
It's proven. Let's just, deal with right now current issues. There were studies that Northwestern did on the program when it was Ceasefire Illinois. Now it's Cure Violence. Mm-hmm. But dealing with the program and the young guys that we deal with, just not even 2 weeks ago, we had over 2,000 participants weigh in, almost 12 coming to our banquet the 27th of December, saying that they want to change their lives. There's guys, like the brother was saying, that there's, a really issue between the Latino communities, African American communities, and the Caucasian communities. But we brought all of those groups together in one place, and it was over 250 guys and girls. It was not an incident. It was very peaceful, and they had, food, and they laughed, and they joked, and really they came into truce. So if you look at that on an epidemic, if you flip it and look at it as a approach of epidemiologist approach, is that you get the guys and you get the girls in, if you have a cold or whatever type of infectious disease that you have, and you continuously treat them with the antibiotic that is continuously to be needed. The sister there at Finger says mentoring programs. That's one form of an antibody. Before you can even get the guys to think about, everyone wants money, but to even get them to sit and have a moment to say, you know what, I'm really going to get up on time, I'm really going to make it, and I'm going to do what I need to do to sustain this job. That's where we come in and we step in and say, look, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to shadow you, or you're going to hang out with us, and it's going to be like a job.
Right.
And then they train themselves.
Malika, what's the community?
Community, of course, and when these conversations come up, this is something you often hear, but some people are talking about the culture of music and how that plays into this. There's a tweet here I'm going to read before I go to the Hangout, because, David, I want to pose this to you. A tweet from Samantha, who says, unfortunately, some are only expressing something that is a reality. Perhaps some perceive it as glorification, talking about the music. Now listen to this video comment left by a member of our community, and let me know what you think.
Just as jihad doesn't necessarily entail a violent struggle, rap music's violent lyrics don't necessarily entail violent acts.
Drake, you're a staff writer at Complex Magazine. Would you agree with that?
I think that's true. I think that there's a lot of the music that is coming out of Chicago right now, though, speaking, it is glorifying violence. It is also, though, a product of that violence, and it's important to keep in mind both. You know, you don't want to be celebrating something that's very painful for a lot of people, but there's also the fact that this is coming from this community, and I think it's shocking to people for a reason. And I would personally, I would credit a lot of the media attention that this entire issue has received to the music. I think that, I mean, similar epidemics are happening in like New Orleans and Philadelphia this year, and Chicago is on the map for a reason. And, I don't know that this was a conscious decision on Chief Keef's part, for example, but I would say that the music has drawn a lot of needed attention to a problem that should have been getting a lot of attention earlier.
So Lance, there are a lot of ways to frame this question. Is it race and segregation? Is it a gun control issue? Is it the culture of the hip hop that's coming out of there? I also know there's policy behind it, and you alluded to that earlier. The housing policy in Chicago that's taking away the large public housing, like Cabrini Green, for example, and spreading those people into other communities in a way that perhaps isn't so well thought through, according to some of my own sources in Chicago. Can you tell me how all these things overlay and play out in this?
Well, yeah. And I think you're exactly right. It is a very complicated situation because all of those factors go into the mixture of contributing to this escalation of homicide, particularly in violence in general. So I'll use the framework that Amina shared with us earlier. If you look at this within the context of our communities as a body, we know that bodies have a natural immune system, built-in systems to defend itself from outside forces, so to speak, or pathogens or disease. So naturally, within our communities, we have the capacity to be very humane, very nonviolent people. Humans are, I would say, nonviolent by nature. It is the conditions of the immediate environment that cause the body to respond to the environment that may play out in violence. So I'm very careful not to fault project the community as being diseased or having some form of problem, and that we need to have we need to fix the community. We don't need to fix the people in the community. We don't need to change the mindsets of the people in the community. We need to change the forces and the factors that impact the community. So you talk about the music. See, what's going on with the music is that for years the music industry has seen the African American community as pathological, and that the hyper concentration of ownership of a few media companies who control everything that we see on television, everything that we hear on the radio, everything that we get on almost on the internet, then controls the image of the community. So as it relates to the music, particularly rap music, and we have a company like Interscope that it gives a kid like Chief Keef, and this is no disrespect to Chief Keef, we love him as our little brother, but here's a little brother who's got a gun case, who is on house arrest for pointing a gun at a police officer. He's in his house, and he produces a video called Don't Like, and the song promotes all forms of mayhem, misogyny, violence against our own community, and then he gets a multi-million-dollar contract from Interscope to kind of promote and distribute his music. And then we look at Interscope and we see that Interscope is investing in the private prison industry. So that's kind of peculiar, where you get a company like Interscope who was investing in private prisons, and then they come get a brother out the neighborhood who raps about shooting and killing, and they give him a multi-million-dollar contract. Then how does the community respond to this? In other words, that's not a community problem. That's external forces outside of the community that are creating a new culture in the community that leads to this violence-related behaviors. And then the kids who see him at 16 years old getting a multi-million-dollar contract for rapping about violence, what do you think they want to do now? And that's one of the reasons little Jojo, the little brother that got killed, was killed, because he saw how Chief Keef was being rewarded for this violence rap. he decides that he wants to get in the game, and he's going to use Chief Keef as his arch enemy. And so he starts to tweet, he starts to use social media to attack verbally through rap music Chief Keef, not understanding that Chief Keef has a group of guys from the streets who are eating off of him, who need to keep Chief Keef in play. So then what they do is retaliate and kill a little brother. So, but see, these forces, they look like it's the black community that's diseased, but in reality, it is a larger society that is diseased and is dumping toxic waste into our communities.
You're talking about a larger society that's diseased. Matthew Casser, who we played a little clip of his package at the beginning of the show, he says Mayor Emanuel, meaning Rahm Emanuel, former chief of staff for President Barack Obama, has shut half of Chicago's 12 mental health clinics that help people cope with issues like violence. And with that, I want to go to our hangout. I want to get in Dallas Wright, who's a recent Northwestern graduate. Dallas, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to touch on something that Lance said. He really did some good work, I believe, in broadening like the definition of violence, right? Because we talk about violence as if it can only be, a gun crime or interpersonal violence, where all these processes that we touched on, lack of fresh food in neighborhoods, the fact that entire swaths of the community have no access to urgent care or trauma units, the housing market, which has been proven to prey on black and brown families in terms of foreclosure, police intimidation and brutality. The list goes on and on and on. All these things are violent processes, but we don't talk about them as if they're violent. And so to take that in mind, combined with the historical sort of reality that Chicago has never been a place that's been welcoming for black or brown people. The entire history of the city has kind of been filled with sort of terrorizing these communities. And so considering that and taking this medical, definition of violence, right? I look at it as more kind of how Lance kind of characterized it. It's the community, the city is the body, and bodies are made up of cells. And so if the body is sick, then necessarily the cells will be suffering from some sickness. So it's not as if individuals are sick with this sort of violence disease. It's the society, the city at large that's sick, and it has been sick since its inception.
Internationally, I think a lot of people associate Chicago with Obama as having come out of there. And I'm curious, the 4 going on 5 years Obama has been in office, are things improving in Chicago?
Well, I can't say what Obama is doing. I don't ride shotgun with Obama. I'm in the trenches. I'm in the jungles. I'm dealing with those guys that, some of the things that Lance and that's my brother, and I understand his concept of, but it is an individual issue that we have to deal with. And that's why programs like Ceasefire, Cure Violence, we go in and we deal with one-on-one to get them to change their mindset on how they feel about the issue, what's going on with just today when he mentioned how rap music and how, so we can get them healthy enough to understand who Obama is. See, right now, those young guys and girls, they don't even know about Obama. They ain't even thinking about Obama. They ain't even thinking about Rahm Emanuel, man. So my thing is to get them to understand that it's not fresh foods in our community. We don't have the clean water for you to have the basic necessities that you should have in your life. Skills. We're providing them survival kits. So it's not, it's day by day with these young guys. So Obama is too big for them right now to even concept on. They can talk about what they don't like as far as the police harassing them. They would, what they do like is, girls, wine, women, and song. They can talk about that. They can talk because that's what they understand and know. So that's why it's so important for us as a panel, as a community, to grab one of them shorties and to come together as the same thought process that we're talking about right now and say, look, here is what's going on. If you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to get these misdemeanors is going to turn into a felony. These felonies is going to turn into some penitentiary time, and they're going to be paying big money to house you. That's what's going to happen with your $1 million contract. Wow. That's what's going to happen. So you need to continue to talk to them.
We're going to continue that in the post-show discussion. Okay. So look, if you're not watching on your computer right now, go to your computer, log in at stream.aljazeera.com. And on the next show, millions of people send text messages every day, but that technology goes far beyond simple communication. Some places it's actually a lifeline. Until then, see you online. Welcome back. This is the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. We're talking about the causes of violence in Chicago and ways to solve the problem. Let's get back to the conversation. Now, Ceasefire works with the police, and it gets money from the government, right? A fairly large contract to help try to stop the violence. Does that hurt your credibility in the streets?
For the record, I'm going to say this, and I may continue to have to say this because I've said it a lot of times. We got a contract for Cure Violence, Ceasefire Illinois, got a contract from the city. If that means that we partnered up with the garbage department, if that means that we partnered up with whatever city department, and no, we don't work for the police. No, my goal is to get the guys before they cross the line to law enforcement. Information that I have about what's going on in the street is not shared with the police because it's not anything that will compromise any type of case or anything. My goal is to get them to understand right now we are at a state of emergency, and right now what your actions is going to happen is going to cause an effect in our community. So no, we don't work for the police. Yes, we did get a contract with the city. Rahm Emanuel felt that the program was effective enough that he wanted to continue on the relationship, and I thank him for that partnership. And I'm pretty sure everybody at Ceasefire Illinois, Cure Violence thanks him for that partnership, because from that it also employed a bunch of guys that and sisters that are influential, credible messengers that can carry the message out to the young guys and girls, because a lot of things is, the WIDOC is growing rapidly. It's just as crowded as the IDOC. That's the, women institution. That's the Women Illinois Department of Corrections.
Oh, so these are prisons.
Yeah, those are prisons for,
for men and
for women. So the violence acts of crimes, which, when you look at the statistics of the women versus the men, it's equal.
Huh.
It's
well, we
just
noticed
about
that
equal.
in the Chief Keef video that it wasn't just the young guys pointing guns at the camera. I think that we saw some young girls there dancing with guns and pointing them at the camera as well.
And those are laws. You have to talk to those guys and let them know, and the girls, the consequences. If I can get access to that camera of that footage with you pointing that gun at the camera, that is a felon. And they can charge you with that felon based upon that footage. Huh. So you have to understand what is set up for you, and you have to talk to them about that. It's just, and if you let them know, and they see that in a minute that's what's going to happen, that they get arrested, yeah, they may be temporarily rewarded with house arrest for a second, but not the way that the system is trying to run. They're making laws to say people like Dr. Lance, that knows young guys and girls in the projects that he works in, he can be charged for a crime as being a gang leader because he knows the guys on the street or he knows the girls on the street. So they're putting laws in that. They're putting laws in, yes, just by association. That if I can catch a case because I know these guys out here, but it's not that we know them to harm them or to cause any type of continuous of the violent act or the transmission of violence to continue. We're telling them that if you don't wake up and see what the setup is, we won't be here to help you because they won't want us to help you.
Right.
Well, Liz, Amina mentioned letting them know. We got a couple tweets here about how to do just that. Derek says, mentoring these Chicago youngsters must involve parents and guardians because without their input, success is unattainable. And on Facebook, we got a comment from Nazmo who says, community involvement is key. It has to be. How else are you going to take individuals who are absorbed by gang violence and poverty and transform them? And of course, you work with students and you see parents. I would like your thoughts on that community involvement.
Well, let me say community involvement is key, as we know. However, we have to really be strategic in our thinking and not lazy in our thinking. The reality is that our communities are suffering from extreme forms of oppression, extreme forms of marginalization. It is extreme levels of apathy because of this oppression. I mean, I think a lot of people will understand that. I think this is why it's important to support and important to elevate the type of work that Sister Amina, Cure, Ceasefire, Brother Teo, all of the brothers and sisters that are doing this work on the ground, because they have the natural ability to connect with the community at a level that most people can't, just because of their backgrounds, their credit. And I just think, you know, in the case of sisters like Amina, just born to do this type of work. But unfortunately, everybody is not able to do that. So we need institutionalized systems to go to work. We need schools to function appropriately. We need housing developments to function appropriately. So in terms of getting the community involved, I think, to me, it's important to get more resources so they can go out. I did a study a few years ago on ceasefire, and the results of the study were really interesting. One of the biggest critiques of ceasefire was that it had a top-down approach. In other words, it was too heavy on its administrative side. However, on the flip side of that, it was seen as one of the most innovative of programs as it related to outreach, the interrupters component, the outreach component. When you talk to folks in the community, they're not confused about whether ceasefire works with the police or not. That's something that the media may talk about. But the folks in the community recognize that these are brothers and sisters who are from among us and want to see us do better. But when you talk to the people who work for ceasefire, they will tell you that they don't have the resources to help the community to the degree that it needs to be helped. So the critique of ceasefire was that there needed to be more money put in the hands and the direction of folks like Amina, and less money put into the administrative running of the program. A lot of times we have these programs that operate in our communities. More money goes to the administrative side and the institutional side than it does to the street side. And that really doesn't make a lot of sense.
I want to get Liz in here in our Google Hangout because, of course, she's an administrator, and I want to know what you're thinking. And then right after Liz, I'd like to go to Dallas because, of course, he spent some time in a charter school. So, Liz, go ahead. You might need to unmute your microphone. No problem.
Thanks. Sorry. I just like to just make this quick point. With all the budget cuts, I think there have been, I mean, they mentioned it in some of the comments that came in earlier about with healthcare and these types of things, but also funding is being taken away from schools as well, and it impacts us in a major way. And there's a direct correlation, I feel, in terms of what's happening on the streets. So for us, we were able to, for the last couple of years, we had over $1 million in additional funding to provide our students with some of the things that I mentioned earlier: jobs, mentoring, support, counseling services, a whole plethora of supports. And those have made a huge and drastic impact in this school. I mentioned earlier the 85% reduction in misconducts, more kids going to college, these types of things. But that funding for us runs out at the beginning of next year. And I think that will have a direct impact on our school. And so as we seek to tighten up the budgets, I think it's important that we really take a look at what type of money we're taking things away from, because it does impact our streets and our children in a very, very real, very tangible way that I think oftentimes isn't looked at sometimes when decisions are made for our city.
In Dallas, we got about a minute left. Can you tell us your experience coming from charter school in Chicago?
Yeah, so I did not attend charter school. I went to CPS K through 12. I was working in a charter school in Inglewood.
I see.
In 2012. And what I saw there, to touch on what Lance also said about institutions, the school, I can't speak for every charter, but the school, along with other charters, there was really an absence of any parent or community involvement in terms of inside the building, what went on with the students and their experience there. And support is great, but that support comes from people who live outside of the community and really can only go on the student's word and what they see about what goes on in that community. And so we kind of have, with the charter proliferation going on, we kind of have a school system that institutionally functions not to strengthen, bolster, and repair communities, but to just kind of deliver certain students out of that community to either a college campus or community college. And so I feel like we need to sort of reassess what the point of our schools really are.
All right, that's all the time we have for right now. But I'll tell you what, let's keep this conversation going. Let's do it on Twitter. Use the hashtag AJStream. I'll join in it as well. And then on Thursday, we'll tell you how SMS text messages are making a difference in developing nations. Until then, we'll see you online.